Hello, friends. Today I'm speaking with a real legend in the fitness industry. It's Mike Boyle. He is one of the foremost experts in the world in strength and conditioning. He's written books on functional training. His facility, Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, has been recognized many times over many years, as being just one of the best companies in the world for strength and conditioning. And so if you've been in this industry at all, you know who Mike Boyle is, and it's a real honor to have him on the podcast. It's a great conversation. We probably could have had this podcast be 10 times as long with all the stories and expertise he has to share. But there's a few things that stood out that I'll tell you that I think were real highlights for me. One is he talked about COVID and how he and his team at MBSC have used this last year to make his business better now than it was pre-COVID. And I think that's really fascinating tips that he shares there. He also talks a little bit about his advice for being a lifelong learner in the fitness space, how coaches today and fitness owners today can continue learning and growing. He talks about how he does that himself. And we also talk about the value of partnership. Many people don't know, but he is a co-founder of MBSC. His name is Bob, and Bob has been his partner since the beginning. And so we talk a little bit about the value of having a partnership. And clearly, Bob's story is very similar to mine and Mark Fisher Fitness. And so that part of our conversation really resonated with me. But it's a great conversation. If you're a big fan of Mike Boyle, like I know many of you are, then keep listening and watching, and let's do this. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. And I'm with a man today who needs no introduction, even though I just gave him one. I'm here with Mike Boyle from Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning and so many other places. So let's just welcome to the stage and get started. What's up, Mike? Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Like I said, I had to book myself on the show, so I'm here and I'm ready to go.
I love it. I think you did actually reach out to Mark and be like, why haven't I been on this podcast yet? And there's no other reason other than we just, thought you were a busy man and wanted to wait until we were ready. But thank you so much for doing this.
Time because I'd listened to a couple and I thought, I got to get on this show. I got to give Mark a head.
This is your moment. This is one you've been waiting for, Mike. So let's make the most of it. Well, I've been asking a lot of my guests this, starting off just because last year has just been such an insane year for us as humans, for us as business owners, for us in the fitness and wellness space. And so I'm asking this question, which is a big question. I know it's a little weighted, but I think you could handle it, which is, over this past year, what have you been learning about yourself and your business as a result of this kind of COVID roller coaster?
Well, one thing I learned is that I'm probably more ready to retire than I thought, because I really, and I wasn't that disturbed because I'm 61 years old. So, I mean, I'm not a kid, and I wasn't that disturbed by not being able to go to work for 3 months. That didn't really bother me a whole lot. So that was actually a good thing. I rediscovered my carpentry skills. The basement I'm sitting in right now, I basically finished myself during the course of the COVID crisis. So I hung the sheetrock and I did the ceilings and I just finished it down not too long ago. So a lot of good stuff that way. From a standpoint, I think it allowed us actually to probably revamp our business in a very positive way, because one of the good things about our business, obviously, is that we've been really successful. And probably one of the bad things about our business is that we've been really successful because I think we had gotten to a point where we probably weren't managing flow really well in terms of some groups were too big. And so being forced to sort of social distance and pod and do a lot of these things, I think the end product is a better business model than the product that preceded it. I think we're going to come out of the other end of this, maybe with a little less volume, and that's okay, but probably with an increase in overall quality, which is really okay.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, those are two really great takeaways from a year that has a lot of downside. One is like, hey, I took some time off of work and that was actually kind of good. I might want to retire sooner than I thought. That's fantastic. And I'm actually talking to a lot of people who are saying something similar. It's hard in this last year to say that something positive has come out of COVID. But I have many people that I'm talking to, Business for Unicorns clients every day, who are secretly saying like, hey, Michael, just so you know, this last year has kind of been amazing for me. I've taken time off, invested in hobbies. It's something that people don't want to say out loud, but it's true. There's a lot of great lessons learned. and the fact that you've kind of changed the model of your business. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? What exactly have you changed that you feel like is a little better coming out the other side?
I mean, really smaller groups. I think what was happening to us is that if there was a big demand at a time, we might have had 20 adults in a group at certain points in time. Yeah. And it was too many. But it was hard because all of a sudden you're thinking, well, how do I control this? How do I tell? Who do I tell they can't come anymore? Who do I tell they're not entitled to this time slot? They're not really complaining. Some people would. And our response would be, well, go to a different time slot. But because of COVID and having to, initially the distancing was like 15 feet per person kind of thing. Mm-hmm. We really had to sit down and revamp our business. So we can get 8 people, but then it was like, okay, we need to be able to do 8 people every 15 minutes and we need to be consistent. So we went to a scheduling system, which we hadn't used before. We were kind of like a drop-in center. We're so mom and pop that it's like literally embarrassing in terms of if people, from a business standpoint came in and watched us function, they would just be, and we've had like Thomas Plummer has come in and he just shakes his head. He's like, I have no idea. I have no idea how you guys are functioning, are alive, are making money. Yeah. Because, our training system is really good, but the other systems are probably, to say, pretty loose, or were pretty loose. Might even have been an understatement in terms of, people kind of came and go as they pleased, and we weren't really like, we'd have to catch people who were coming 3 times a week who were only paying for 2. I mean, you know what I mean? It was just because it's a busy place. I mean, our main facility is 20-something thousand square feet, and it's really easy to kind of, wiggle your way around in there. So, as I said, I think for us, I think we're a much better business now than we were before COVID.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, good for you for being able to, I know it can be hard, especially after you've been in business for so long, to take a hard look at yourself and make those kinds of adjustments. It can be tough. I know. I mean, we only have MFF for about 10 years. And I know sometimes we're so committed to certain ways of doing things that it's hard to change course. But, bravo to you for being able to make pivots like that, because it sounds like you're all the better.
It was survival. I mean, this is what we had to do. We started out outside. And, and you're probably living through this now. People were much more concerned. People were really afraid. This was like, the Black Plague or something. And people were very concerned about, were we going to wipe down every piece of equipment? And were they going to have to touch anyone else? Were they going to be near anyone else? Would they be within 6 feet of anybody? And so in order to get people back into a fitness facility, we had to go to some lengths to make sure that people felt comfortable. I mean, if you go in our place now, there's orange construction barriers up all over the place, separating things off. I mean, it's very, it's very hard. Like we had a couple of positive COVID cases, and people said, well, we want to know about close contacts. I said, no one in here is a close contact. You could not, if you tried to be a close contact, you'd still have difficulty being near anybody else, within 6 feet for 15 minutes of the hour that you're here. I said, I don't even think it's physically possible without you following somebody around and break, every rule that we have.
Sure.
And the thing was, people were comfortable. They were like, yeah, you're right. I mean, the way it's set up, and people have come to us and said, I love the way it's set up. I feel like I can come back and work out. I don't feel unsafe. So it ended up kind of, it helped us on both ends. But I mean, the big reality was we're very close. We're at least 80% of our pre-COVID numbers right now, where other people are out of business.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, let me ask you this, Mike, because we mentioned this briefly before we started recording, but this moment has been a chance for, some business unfortunately to close, but others to kind of reinvent themselves and adjust in order to survive. I think that's going to continue as people are going back to work, but maybe some people are working remotely. I know in New York City, there are tens of thousands of square feet of office spaces that are not going to be reoccupied anytime soon. And so a lot of companies like MFF, and many that I'm talking to, are trying to figure out, how do we adjust to this now post-COVID world, where we might have people who want to work from home and do online things. People might be hesitant to come back in the gym for another 6 months or longer. And also with the ongoing competition that seems to be ramping up over the last few years with tech, with Peloton, with the mirror thing, with all these things are also competing for our clients' dollars and attention. So what do you think the business model is going to look like over the next year that'll be successful in managing all those things?
I think you have to have online capability. We've got Train Heroic workouts. We've got Zoom classes. We've got all the stuff that we need to do. We're adding in like an on-demand component, but we very strongly believe that the in-person thing is here to stay. I think if anything, people are dying to be back among other people. I know people who just love to go to restaurants because you can go in and sit with your friends without a mask and have a conversation. And it's, it's legal and non-judgmental. No one's looking at you and going like, oh, what are you doing? Pull it up. Let's cover your nose. All the bullshit that you have to deal with every day of trying to live in this world. The restaurant is the only place where you can kind of go and be normal.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that at least with the gym, I mean, we're always yapping at people about masks and pulling their masks up and covering their nose and wearing their mask, right? But at least they're there amongst other people, because I think we are inherently social, tribal beings, and that we won't want to be isolated. That's why I think, whatever, Mirror, Tonal, Peloton, whatever it is, people can keep doing that stuff as long as they want. And, everybody who invents it's going to make millions of dollars. And the next guy's going to come along and he's going to invent something else and he's going to make $1 million. And the next guy's going to invent it and he's going to make $1 million. But the reality is the gyms have never gone away. I think that, the big box, unsupervised, do whatever the hell you want gym maybe is in trouble. Yeah. But, what we are now, the MFFs, the Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, those type of places, the micro gyms that are well run, I think are very much here to stay. I mean, I think your clientele, when things ramp up, are going to be, if the place is set up well and they feel safe, people are going to come. And the other thing is, there was an article that I saw, and I think it was New York Times. People are willing to pay an absurd amount of money, even for in-home stuff, but just like, okay, if, for me and my trainer to be able to go to the gym, some people, you guys are probably in the freaking $400 an hour market, where people are coming in and saying, hey, if I can get a one-on-one, and have space to myself, my own 12 by 12 block, I'll pay some, what we would consider in Boston, some ungodly.
Sure.
But, New York, it's funny. Boston's a good city, but it's not the same market as New York City.
Yeah, sure. Well, I agree with you 100%, Mike, that I think, in-person's here to stay. I think we are tribal beings who really thrive in relationships to other people and are inspired and motivated to do our best work when we're with other people. I don't think people can have the best workouts of their lives at home staring in front of computers. For most people, I think some people might thrive in that environment, but I think those people might be the exception from the folks I'm talking to. So I agree. I think in-person is here to stay. In-person is here to stay. Let me switch gears, because we can keep talking about COVID-related things, this whole conversation. Let me ask you about something else. So one of the things that I've always really admired about you from afar is that you always identify yourself as like a lifelong learner, just continuing to learn and grow. And I think I've heard you say multiple times that just the only thing you know is that there's always something more to know. And I appreciate that so much. I'm curious, what do you think right now about kind of the current state of what it takes to become a personal trainer? I feel like the bar in many cases, I've only been in the industry 10 years. The bar in many cases seems like it's just gotten lower. There are more and more online weekend certifications. And it seems like the path to continuing education and learning for trainers feels like there's more options than ever before. So how do you think about someone entering into the space, getting the right certification, and then figuring out their own path to continuing to learn over time? Because I feel there's so many choices, and it's so hard to know what to actually spend your time and energy on. So how do you think about that for new trainers coming up right now?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, I mean, the barrier of entry is low, and I'm fine with the barrier of entry being low. It's always been low. At one point, it didn't exist.
Yeah.
If you're some meathead who lifted weights, then you could show other people how to lift weights and people would pay to do it. And then sort of certifying bodies got involved in that. And then that's become a big money maker. And we're in the certification business too. So people would say you're trying to make money off it, but I happen to think ours is better than everybody else's. So that's okay. And
yep.
I always tell everybody ours is not what you would consider a primary certification. You need to get like an ACE or an NASM or something that's nationally recognized, because here's the interesting thing, and you may or may not know this, but to be nationally accredited, you have to lower the bar. Because for us, we've tried to go through the accreditation process because we said, hey, if we can be the kind of certification like NASM or ACE or one of these people, where people can get a job because they're a CFSC, that would really help us. And what they said to you is that, well, yeah, that would mean you'd have to not have any practical component. There can be no subjectivity. Somebody needs to take, a test at a testing center, like an SAT type test, and pass fail based on that. And we were funny. I remember having a conversation with Greg Rosen. He was like, the last thing you want to do is do that. He said, because you'll lower yourself to a point where it's worthless. And I look at that and think a lot of the ones that you get, I won't say worthless, but I will say not worth very much, but you need them. You get that, you get your entry level. Now you can go get a job. And then it's up to you. And I think that's what you said, lifelong learner. I don't care what you do. I don't care whether you're, if you said you're a professional podcast host, or if you're a personal trainer or whatever you are, if you're not a lifelong learner, then I'm trying to come up with a polite word to describe what I'd like to say. I can't even, let's just say you're not on the success track if you're not a lifelong learner, because things are going to change. That is the nature of the world, right? So you've got to constantly be looking and learning. It was funny. I was just listening to you with the Rebel performance guy, James. I can't think of his last name, but
James Serby,
whether it's, whether you're reading Seth Godin or you're reading David Epstein or whatever you're reading, but you've got to be reading, you've got to be studying, you've got to figure out. The other thing is you've got to figure out your method of learning, because one thing people always complain to me is, well, I don't like to read. And then I'm like, well, you better learn to listen. I get that some people are not naturally good readers. I'm a very capable reader. I can, I have no problem reading. But if somebody doesn't, everything's available. The Zig Ziglar Audio University thing. Like, everybody can get every bit of information that they need on audio, and everybody can go through the same process and, sit with a notepad and write notes while they listen, and you can pause and, write things down. You can rewind. It's the good thing is that everybody, and this is what drives me crazy, everybody has the same opportunity. Whenever people say, we don't have that same opportunity, I'm like, I think you do. Because information is so incredibly readily available. And even, mentorship, friendship, people to help you, it's all really readily available. Like, if you you start going to the Perform Better series when you're 21 years old and you're simply polite, and you go to the social and you have a couple of beers and you say hello to somebody and you introduce yourself, and you're not a haunt and you're not a pain in the ass, and you're back there the next year, people are going to remember you. That's how I built my career. I mean, I started just going and talking to people and calling people up on the phone, and I was amazed that some really high quality people responded to me.
Yeah.
And, at that time, I answered phone calls because there was no email, but people got on the phone,
of course,
and people had conversations, and people were willing to sit down and talk. And, that is still there, particularly if you are motivated and you ask people politely and you're, a little bit persistent, but not a pain in the ass. And I think that's the thing that you have to master is this. There's an interpersonal skill that you need to master that is essential, I think, to all business success. Like, I know some incredibly successful people in sales who are total clowns.
Yeah.
But they're really good people, and they can interact, and everybody likes them. And I'm not sure what they know from a product standpoint, but people want to buy their stuff. People want to buy things from them. If you hire, no matter who it is, if you hire this guy, people will buy stuff from him because he's good at it. And so there's a huge personal thing to this that has nothing to do with what you look like or, how much weight you can lift or any of those things.
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm going to aggressively agree with you here, Mike, because I think you're right. Between those two things, between information being more accessible and more free and better quality than it's ever been before. You can go take college courses on any topic on platforms like Coursera for free, or watch millions of hours of YouTube of people telling you exactly how they've succeeded in any area, including fitness, for free. And then that in combination with just showing up and being persistent, having great interpersonal skills to ask questions and be persistent to, reach mentors, that's so available. People are so accessible. And I've been in a lot of industries, and I would say in the fitness industry, I found people be more accessible than any other place I've worked, in that they're willing to pick up the phone or answer an email or respond to a direct message on Instagram, and answer your questions, even if they don't know you. I think that's huge for people coming up in industry right now. So take advantage of those things.
Right.
And no matter what your learning style is, there's something out there for you.
I've had people say to me, "Oh, I've always wanted to work at Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning." I'm like, "Why have I never met you then?
Right.
Why
Exactly.
did you come in and visit? Why haven't you introduced yourself?" Or I'll have people say, "Oh, I'd love to stop by," and they come in and they hang around for like 20 minutes. Okay, I'm going to go now. And I kind of look and think, like, we just let you in, and you could
Hmm.
walk all day and talk to coaches all day and learn
Yeah.
all day, and you
Yep.
stayed for 20 minutes. And you
Yeah.
think there might be some reason in hell that I might ever consider hiring you. Like, I'm going to consider hiring somebody, who sat on the floor for 4 hours with a notebook,
Yeah.
and then got up and said, "I got about 50 questions when you get a few minutes." You know what I mean? I'd like to.
Exactly.
I went, and this is me. So I went to visit then International Performance Institute, which was Mark Verstegen pre-athletes performance. And I went down as a visitor. I'm 10 years older than Mark. So I'm 40, he's 30 at that time. And I literally did just that. I sat on the turf with my notebook and I took notes.
Yeah.
I watched what they did. I thought about questions. And, and then, he was done and he was, what do you think? And I was like, "Oh, I got, if you get a minute, I got some stuff I'd like to talk to you about."
Yeah.
And the funny thing about him, now this is why he's successful. He said, "It would be great if you could come to the staff meeting with us. We're going to have a staff meeting in like an hour." And now I was down there like with my wife and her sister. And, we were kind of at the beach because it was like Sarasota, Bradenton area. And I said, "I'd love to do that. That'd be great." I said, "What are we going to do?" He said, "Oh, we're going to ask you questions for like an hour." Okay. I said, "As long as
Okay.
I get some questions too," I said, "I'd be really happy to do that with you guys."
That's
But
great.
on the
Yeah.
top of your I was like, like we're two of the more successful guys in the industry. And, we met because I decided to make a trip to Florida to watch him because people had said he was good at what he did. And I sat on my ass and I kept my mouth shut and I brought a notepad and a pen and I wrote stuff down.
Yeah.
This is not the success is not a complicated topic. That's what's
Yeah.
very, very interesting. I always said, it's really easy, but it's hard.
Well, that's the thing is, I think you're right that it is a difficult path, and it's not that complicated, right? It takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy, but the path can be pretty simple. I mean, and it's so funny you say that about people coming to visit. 'Cause I've had that same exact experience at MFF. We people come and beg us to come and see, and we've never said no to anyone. If they want to, come take classes, stay for a whole day, come to a team meeting, we're so transparent. And the difference between people who come and like barely engage, don't see taking any notes, don't ask any questions afterwards, and the people who do all those things is so stark. It's so stark. And I see the people who are inherently curious, really probing, really taking notes and trying to apply what they're seeing and apply what they're learning. I see them succeed faster. It's that simple.
Without question. I would absolutely say without a doubt. I mean,
Yeah.
I can almost tell you, I hate to say it, but if somebody's over the age of 21, I will tell you within the first 15 or 20 minutes whether I think they're going to be successful or not. And I would bet I'll be right about 90% of the time. I will be wrong if they're under 21, I'll be honest, because we've had some, and I always tell this story. Kevin Carr was an intern probably when he was 19, like right, maybe his sophomore year at UMass. And he was a nice kid, but he was quiet. And I didn't think that Kevin Carr was going to be like, freaking rock star, writing his own books, presenting, business partner. Like that was not what I envisioned for Kevin Carr. I just thought nice kid, kind of quiet. But our other coach, Nicole Rodriguez, was like, "This kid's really good. We need to have him come back next year. We need to hire him and pay him." And I was like, "Really?" I said, "The kid from UMass, the quiet one?" And she was like, "I'm telling you, he's going to be great." And the other thing I've learned, listen to your staff because, one, the young kids can be intimidated around the boss.
Sure.
And some of the older ones can put on a good show around the boss. So, you really need to talk to people's coworkers and think like, what's this guy or girl like when I'm not around?
I think that's really good advice. Yeah.
Do
That's
they
really
work exactly like they did before? Do they treat people? Because I've had other people say, "Oh, he's the greatest showman. He's unbelievable." The second you walk in the door, he turns it on, and the second
Yep.
you walk out the door, he turns it off. And I'm like,
Yep.
that's good to know, because I
Yeah.
know that going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's great for hiring. I think that's also a really great tip for ongoing management of people. Because I know there's been a few times where people told me that a certain employee was like really screwing up. And I'd be like, really? Like every time I see them, they're on point. Like every time I'm in the building, I see them, they're on fire. And they're like, well, that's when you're around. And so it's what it applies to both hiring and ongoing management. You have to really, use the people around you to be your eyes and ears, because what you see as the boss when you walk in the door might be something else.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people always say, he manages up well, and there's some people that manage up really well.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Mike. I wanted to talk a little bit about partnerships, because I know you have a co-founder, Bob Hanson, who I've never met either, but but being in a partnership with myself and Mark Fisher, we get asked about our partnership all the time. It's a topic I haven't heard you talk about much or write about much in podcasts and things. And so if you're cool talking about it, I'd just love to know a little bit about, how did you and Bob first get connected when you co-founded MBSC that many years ago?
It's actually a really interesting story. So I was coaching Bob's son. Bob's son played hockey at Boston University, and Bob was involved in kind of a fledgling training business, what would have been the precursor to like the high-speed treadmill kind of places for peer acceleration. They opened it for peer place with skating treadmills and high-speed treadmills, and he was a hockey parent who had gotten involved with some hockey guys who thought they wanted to open a hockey training business, and it didn't work, unfortunately. For whatever reason, it wasn't succeeding. And that was when we met. And it was funny, I didn't know him particularly well. I mean, now he's arguably, one of my 3 or 4 best friends after the last, whatever it's been, 97, 25, almost 25 years. But I knew, he was just kind of running the business. When I remember when I got there to look at things, he was mopping the mats, like the floor. They had the black mat floor, and he was mopping.
Yep.
And right off the bat, I was like, well, I like this guy, because he's mopping the floor. He's keeping it clean. He's worried about the little things, the details. And then, we kind of entered into this partnership where the good thing for me is I had very little to lose at that point. I was young. I wasn't investing any money because these guys were losing money, and I was able to work a deal where they would let me come in and kind of take over with the idea that they were going to get their money back. And I just said, I need somebody to run the business. I was like, I don't want to do that. I have no desire to collect checks and talk to people about, how much they owe or anything. Like, I just don't want to do that stuff. I want to coach. That's what I do well. And he was not a coach. His background, he had come out of like a retail background. So his background was the total opposite in terms of he didn't want to coach. He didn't want to be on the floor. He didn't think that was where he belonged. So, in that way, we were kind of the perfect marriage. And I tell people that all the time now, part of my business advice for people all of the time is never partner with another trainer. You'll just, you'll fight like cats and dogs about who's going to do the shitty jobs, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. Whereas if you have a partner who's the business partner, then his job is the business part. He's the one who's going to worry about money getting in the bank and money, getting paid to whoever's supposed to get paid and all those things. And so, we're very much like I use the restaurant analogy a lot, back of the house, front of the house,
Exactly.
Chef, he's the maitre d', like he's out front, making sure that everything's running the way it's supposed to. I'm in the kitchen, making sure the food is good. And that's been a really good kind of marriage for us for a really long time. I mean, we've been together for 25 years. We rarely fight or argue. I could probably count maybe on one hand and maybe at most 2 hands over the last 25 years. But he's been very good with me about what my vision of the business was, because I was really clear with those guys in the beginning. I told them right off the bat, we will go out of business doing this right, or you'll get your money back. I'm not making any compromises. I'm not going to do anything for money. Whenever anybody said, oh, we can make a lot of money, I'm like, no, that's, I know exactly how I want to do this. I'm going to do it exactly that way. There is zero compromise in me. Just, it's, I think, my nature.
Yeah. That goes hand in hand with your restaurant analogy, right? There's very few chefs who are going to go to a restaurant and totally change the style of food they make. Right. If I'm an Italian chef, I'm not going into a restaurant business with someone and now suddenly making Thai food, right? And so you knew what kind of food you wanted to make, and we're really
from the front and said, hey, you need to water down all the ingredients here. You can't be paying for this, you can't be paying for that. It's the exact same analogy. You'd be like, no, I can't make, the quality of food that I want, I can't make with, generic shit that we're going to get at, Costco. Right. That's not going to work for me. And so that was exactly how we ran it. And over time, I mean, I think that was our key to our success, really, was that we were, it's funny because in our business, one, we started out just with athletes, and in a lot of cases, the parents were the consumers. If we weren't professional athletes themselves, then a parent was paying the bill.
Got it.
And that was a really difficult situation because the parents are constantly trying to force you to compromise. That's why even like with me, people would say, well, how much does it cost for Mike to train my son? And the answer was always like, that price point does not exist. Mike will not train your son. He doesn't train anybody's son. It's not going to happen that way because we can't run a business where the highest bidder gets to pay the boss to do it. And then, they think they own you. All of a sudden now they're like, well, I'm paying you X number of dollars an hour. I get to tell you how I want it done. And we're always like, nope, sorry. We've told people to leave. We've told people to give them their money back. And you guys know that the best thing to do with a rich person is tell them you don't want their money.
They'll want it even more. Yeah.
Like, no, like you can't say no to me. You can't not take my money because I have lost.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, I love to hear your story about how you and Bob connected and how it's gone so well over there, because it really does mimic mine and Mark's story, and it's also very similar to Cressy and Pete. Who I didn't really know there were other me's until I met Pete. Oh, there's other business guys that people don't mostly know, and I think more the last few years people know Pete and I a little bit more. We've stuck our head out from behind the office walls. But it's fascinating to see that you really tell people all the time, if you're a fitness person, don't partner up with another fitness person, partner up with someone that does the business side. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, it's a big part of why my partnership with Mark has worked all these years, is because I don't have that many opinions about the fitness. I just don't.
I think guys like Mark and Eric, they probably were at a seminar 20 years ago where I said that, where I was like, hey, if you want to be successful at this, don't partner, and Eric initially partnered with a couple other trainers. And they were in Waltham. And then when he decided to get out on his own, I think, everybody, and because there's a lot of trial and error just in everybody's life. And I mean, I always think, like, for me, in some ways, you could look at it and say, well, I was lucky. I found some guys, with an existing business that were struggling. And, there was one guy, Bob, who was a really good guy, and he was running the business for them. And we were kind of compatible as people, and we've been really successful.
Yeah. So for our listeners and viewers who are thinking about developing a partnership, aside from partnering up with maybe a business person, if you're a fitness person or vice versa, what other lessons or tips or advice do you have for people who are looking for a partner or thinking about developing a partnership right now?
Oh, well, the same way if anybody's looking for a partner for anything else, right? You need the personal characteristics. I always say to people, don't do business with people of low character. So if you're looking for a partner, character is job one. So I've always said, I look at people and I think, because again, we're on the road, we're doing whatever. I look at people, if they're the types, if they cheat on their wife, if they're loud, asshole, drunk, if they're rude to people in restaurants or whatever, like those are all the little lessons that people tell you all the time about life, apply double in partnerships. Because, one thing you realize is this person is going to be in charge of your financial future. I used to tease Bob when my kids were born, or my daughter was born. I brought him in a little picture of my daughter to put on his desk. And I said, just keep that right there to remind you what you're doing, And he had that for a long time. We would always joke about it, but I trust Bob, with all of my funds, really with my children's futures, because again, if you talk about embarrassing, I know way less than I should know about, about our financial situation. I honestly don't. Like, I don't even know if I'm a signer on our checking account or on our bank account. Like, I'm not sure that I could go and get money out of the bank from our business if I needed it. The only thing that I do have is a partnership agreement that tells us how much each one of us owns. But there's not much else. Because it has to be. People always like, oh, you got. I had an accountant one time. It's like, you got to go every month. You got to go over all the figures. You got to go over all the expenses. I was like, no. If I have to do that, I'm partnered with the wrong guy. Like, if I have to look over his shoulder 12 times a year and question him about, American Express charges or whatever it is, then I got the wrong guy. And if it turns out that, 25 years into it, I realized he was screwing me over, then I'm not as good a judge of character as I thought I was. But
Sure.
I mean, I tell everybody, whether it's employees, business partners, whatever, character matters. It is first and foremost what you need, because sometimes you can get caught in somebody's charisma and think this person's great, except they, fill in the blank, whatever it is. And I made that mistake early on. I had a business partner early on, and he was an amazing coach, except, and I'll leave the except out, but the except was a big except. And you just realize that it never works out. Every cliche you've ever heard, the leopard doesn't change its spots, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. All true. And I can't tell you the number of people I've seen who've gotten burned in relationships where you think, well, you never should have got involved with that person.
Yeah.
You knew that, you knew that guy wasn't a good guy from the get-go. And, I always think like someone, whatever, spouse, partner, if your spouse or partner can't trust them, then, you can't trust them. You don't want them counting your money.
Yeah, that's a great sign. I mean, like any good relationship, the foundation has to be trust. If you're going to trust them with your money and your future and your kids' future, there's got to be a real foundation of like real trust. So I want to, I want to underline that, because I think that there's nothing more could be more true about finding a great partner. It's just knowing their character, knowing you can trust them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. So I have two questions from other people that wanted me to ask you these because they knew we were talking. One was, Mark wanted me to ask you this. He said something to the effect of, one of the things he's always admired about you is that you are willing to change your mind when you learn more information, specifically about training. And over the years, because he's been such a mega fan, he's tracked, you changing your mind about things as you get more information. And he thinks that's such an amazing quality. So what he wanted to know was, what have you changed your mind about when it comes to your business over the last few years?
I think one of the things I've changed my mind about in our business is that, if I get out of the way, it gets better. I think, and that's been a gradual process for me, because I think your tendency is to sort of, to overmanage.
Yeah.
I've realized Kevin Carr and Brendan Rierick and, Steve and Dan, I have amazing, amazing people that work for us.
Yep.
And a lot of times I just, get out of the, I love the quote, lead, follow, or get out of the way. I need to do a better job of getting out of the way more often and letting, again, much like the situation with Bob, I let Bob do his thing. He runs the business. And, even like with certification, Kevin runs it. I don't get in Kevin's way. I may, there are certain times, I think some people might look at me and think, oh, he's getting lazy. And I look at it and think, no, I'm getting smart. You can call it whatever you want, but I think it's smart. So I think that's been the biggest thing, is just to realize that sometimes really good management is not doing anything.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's a great, I still have a tendency to do that, Mike. So I'm so glad you shared that today, because I still have a tendency to, when things are not going well, just to squeeze harder and tighten the reins and tighten the systems and the processes. And I think oftentimes what would serve me best, and I'll speak on behalf of Mark as well, I think we both have this tendency, is to actually loosen up the grip, actually do a little less, give people more freedom, more autonomy. And that has to be, again, on a basis of trust. I think it's a really great tip for our listeners. Yeah. Next question. Who was it? It was Danny Two Guns and Jeff Lewis, who I think you know both of. They sent a bunch of questions, but I'm going to pick one. This one's about training young athletes. I think, you train a fair amount of young athletes. And one of the challenges that they're running into, and I hear this a lot, is that training young athletes is so seasonal. And they're constantly trying to convince young athletes that they should train year round. So their question essentially was, what have you done, if anything, that was successful at helping young and old athletes alike understand they really need to train year round, not just seasonally?
In all honesty, I think that's a really tough thing to do, because parents just aren't there yet. And so I think one of the things I've been able to do is accept the fact that we may get a kid for, 2 seasons, or really 2 off seasons. We may get a kid for the summer, and then whatever the preseason is. And that some of these kids may disappear for 6 months. And even though I know, my kids and their friends train year round, and they're with me and they train year round, and my kids are succeeding. Like my daughter he's a full scholarship college ice hockey player. And a lot of that is because she's trained year round. People are always like, well, she's so strong and she shoots so hard. And I'm like, well, because she never stops working out. But I do think that is a really tough sell, and that it's going to take more time. The other thing, it's a tough sell and it's expensive. You've got to have people that are really, really committed to the process to spend, thousands of dollars a year on training when they're already spending thousands on tournaments and thousands on equipment and thousands on travel. So I don't think I have any magic answer for them except accepting the fact that you may not be able to do it, and realizing that that's, it's again, the relationship thing. It's not about you, right? You're not failing because you can't get that kid to stay year round. That is just, that's the, the nature of the beast, the lay of the land, however you want to look at it, and just accept that and do a really good job with them when you have them.
Yeah. I think the one thing that you shared that stood out to me as a possible, could help is when you do have those case studies like your daughter who do train year round and it has made a difference. I think the more you share that, the more you share those kind of testimonials and those stories, other kids will see, oh, look, so-and-so just got a full scholarship and look at how they train. Maybe I should be more like that. Yeah. So I think that kind of modeling works for young folks. They want to do what their peers, their successful
and that's
peers.
why I tell those stories all the time. I mean, some part of it is I'm proud of my kids, but part of it is that, their ability to stay with the process resulted in them achieving more.
Yeah,
and
100%.
And so you do have to, you've got to sell your anecdotes. You've got to say to people, hey, if you want to be like so-and-so who got a full scholarship, then you got to commit to this thing. It can't be, a 10-week on, 10-week off kind of deal, because, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I mean, that becomes the story of your life. And you may eventually get a kid who gets to college. And, again, when you get to college, that's the way that it is. You're training year round. If you're on a, it's that way in Division III now. Like, you can't go anywhere and not have to train year round, not have to lift year round, not have to condition year round, not have seasons that overlap, all of these things. So I think part of it, as I said, part of it is just realizing that it's going to take time for parents to catch on, and not to sort of, I think what happens is people get almost despondent about it. Like, oh, I'm not doing a good job. I can't get these kids to do that, and realize that that may just be kind of the way that it is right now. It doesn't mean stop trying. It's just realizing that, if you can get a kid who trains with you 20 or 25 weeks a year, that's going to be a really big success. And if you can get that kid to do something during the year, whether they're with their team or at school or whatever it is, then that's going to be a really big success too.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. So I know I'm going to have about 10 more minutes left. So what I want to do is I want to get to our final 5 questions. So these are 5 questions I ask every guest. They're just about you and how you manage yourself and things that work for you. And they're meant to be kind of rapid fire, but you can also take your time, so if you want to elaborate, you can. But it's just 5 questions. Let's jump in. Question number 1 is, Mike Boyle, what is one thing you love about being a gym owner?
I love, in all honesty, and it sounds corny as hell, I love changing people's lives. Like, I'm at the point now where I love hearing an adult client say things like, my medication got reduced, or I'm out of pain, those types of things. Like, I really, really enjoy that part now. Like, we've won national championships. I've got a World Series ring. Like, I've done a lot of things that should have been gratifying. And I will tell you, they were very, very temporary. Whereas the consistent feeling that you get knowing that you're genuinely helping someone. I mean, if you're on that, like if you don't get off on that, you're going to be in the wrong business. Trust me, like pumping iron yourself, and getting a good arm pump. If that's what it's all about for you, then
it's only going to take you so far. Yeah,
you're going to run out of gas real quick. But if you get off on seeing people, succeed. Like, what I love, we have, believe it or not, we have 2 sets of 3 generation clients.
Wow.
Where we have grandparents, parents, and kids in our facility. And so that, to me, that's like crazy, amazing testament to what we've been able to do.
Yeah, great answer. I mean, that kind of generational impact, if that doesn't get you excited, you're definitely in the wrong business. So great answer. Question number two, we talk a lot on this podcast about customer service and over delivering for clients and really making it personal. So what's the coolest or maybe most memorable thing that you and your team have done for a client?
Well, it's really interesting because I thought about this. I listened to I listened to actually Luca
Mhm.
post, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
asked that question. And I thought, wow. And I'll tell you the coolest thing I've ever done, and it was a long time ago, was I went to a wake. And
Mm,
it's a really interesting story, but I was training a guy who was a vice president. This was when I was at BU, really, but probably right around the time I had opened my business, but I was still bouncing back and forth between places. And one of the guys that I worked with came in and said, did you hear about Joe's wife? And I was like,
mhm.
what wife? And this guy had been training with me a couple days a week for probably a year. And he had never said anything about anybody being sick. And he was like, yeah,
Yeah.
she finally passed away. It had been a long battle or whatever.
Mm,
And I thought to myself, wow, this guy, you know, never, for whatever reason, didn't mention this. And,
yeah.
and he was like, yeah, I'm like, well, what about services? He's like, well, the wake is right now. He said, there's a bunch of people from work at the wake. So I'm like at the gym, in like my, whatever shorts and a BU sweatshirt at that time. And I got in my car and I drove probably 45 minutes to the wake. And I got a reception. Like there were people there. They were like important people there who didn't get the reception that I got.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
got, thank you. I couldn't have done it without you. I couldn't have got through this without you. And I was like, I'm literally standing there thinking to myself, I didn't even know I was doing this. Like I had
Wow.
no idea. And that's, I think, to me, what stands out sometimes is that you may be doing something for someone without ever knowing that you're doing it for them. And I
Hmm.
know that because it happened to me. And I think it
Yeah.
could be happening to everybody who's in the training business somewhere along the way by providing that hour for that person to, to kind of have an outlet and to not have to think about whatever it is that might be really kind of laying on their psyche at that point in time. So, um, and the funny thing is, as I was all apologetic. Sorry, I didn't have a chance to. And he was so thankful that I came. He was like,
Yeah.
"I don't care that you're in, your shorts." And so now, I mean, I've probably been since then. I can't tell you how many wakes I've gone to, in a sweatshirt and sweatpants.
Yeah.
And people are always so thankful. They're always thankful that you came. They never look and think, "Oh, geez, look at Mike Boyle, what a bum," came to a wake in sneakers and
Yeah.
dirty sweatpants and a sweatshirt. They just think, "Wow, Mike left work to pay his respects to me," because that's really, you go to the wake for the survivors, right? I
Sure.
mean, that's who
Yep.
you're for. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously you're honoring the person, but and
Yeah.
people might think that's crazy morbid or whatever, but I
No,
will.
I think it's a beautiful story, and it's a great example of exactly what you said, which is you don't know the impact you're making by spending that 1 hour, 2, 3 hours a week with that person. That hour can really be what's holding them together. It can really be the thing that's helping them fill their cup. It's allowing them to stay strong for a sick spouse. I mean, it's such a beautiful example of of the things we do for our clients without even knowing it sometimes.
Yeah, and then I think that's, like you said, that's the stuff that um should make you just keep doing what you're doing, and maybe
Yeah.
kind of work less, think more, or work more, think less. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
a lot of times you don't have any idea what's going on anyway.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Great answer. Awesome. Question number three here is when someone on your team does this, it makes you super happy. So when you see your team do this, what really lights you up?
When someone on my team goes out of their way for a client, that's what makes me
Mm,
super happy. And it was
yeah.
as simple the other day. One of the young girls that's working for us now went out with her client to meet the mom at the car. She was like, "I want to meet your mom." And
Nice.
she walked out into the parking lot with the
Amazing.
girl. And, this is a girl who hasn't been with us a really long time, but I know she's going to be really, really good because she does stuff like that all the time.
Yep.
And it's that, when you see somebody, because you're always talking to them about over delivering, you're always talking to them about kind of, needing them to go the extra mile. But when you see them do it on their own,
Yeah.
it's really rewarding to think like, okay. And when you hear it, like I went out last night, I went out to dinner, and every time I saw a couple clients, excuse me, and I constantly get clients telling me how great our staff is.
Hmm.
And it's the same, like you can't You can't get enough of hearing how great your kids are. You can't get enough of hearing how great you are. Really.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
honestly, because, and I do that with parents all the time now. I always will tell parents, like, your son, your daughter, whatever it is unbelievable. I said, and I know you probably hear it all the time because he or she is great, but you should hear it again.
Yeah.
And, and it's that way with staff. I mean, I can't tell you, people are always raving about, whatever, Kevin or Steve or Dan or Vinny or whoever it is, they're always like, they're so great. They're always going the extra mile for me.
Yeah.
And I
And
always think we've done the right thing. We've hired the right people.
That's such a great example too. I mean, when people think of over delivering or creating a wow customer service experience, they think it has to be some grandiose gesture, and it's not. It's these small, unexpected things like "let me meet your mom" and then walking outside. I mean, it's such a perfect example. So I love that answer. Yeah. Question number 4. This one's pretty tactical, but this is, what is your most reliable strategy for generating leads? So if you have to go get some new members in the door tomorrow, where do you turn to look for some good leads?
Exact answer to that. Do a really good job with the people you currently have. That is the best thing you could do to generate leads, without a doubt. We don't do any. That's what I mean when you talk about primitive. We have no funnel, no lead generation. We have nothing, literally nothing in place except really good training.
Yeah.
Our business has grown literally exponentially every year for, I can't tell you how many years. I think this COVID year will be the first year, I don't know when, in at least a dozen years, that we did not post a profit. And that we were not up in the 7 to 8%, in our gross range. And because you're the numbers guy, you go 7 to 8% over 8 or 9 years, you've doubled your revenue.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, and so I think that's the really critical part.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. It's delivering an amazing experience, an amazing service, being essential to your existing clients, and then they'll talk about you. Yeah. And you might need to remind them to talk about you, but they'll talk about you because you're essential. Yeah, so I love that answer. Amazing. Last question. Question number 5 is, what is one thing you think gym owners can start doing better tomorrow? What's one thing you just wish everyone would start just doing this better tomorrow?
Stop being dicks. We are such an ego-driven, it's all about me profession. That's why I always say again, it goes back to the success is easy thing. There are so many people who can't get over themselves, in the fitness business. And you kind of look at people and think, you're going to struggle. It's going to be hard because it's still about you. You've got to, I tell people in the beginning when we're interviewing, when we're meeting people, whatever it is, when we have our first intern meeting, I tell them hey, just so you understand, as of today, it's no longer about you. If you're worried about, when you eat or when your workout is, or, if there's me questions, the me questions are going to make me not like you. Because you're here now, you've gotten on board the train to take care of the clients.
Yeah.
So you'd bet to be on for the duration with that. And I don't want to hear about, you needing time to work out or, lunch, and I hate to say it, it sounds terrible, but most of our guys, there's no lunch hour. Guys go in, they eat lunch, in between sessions, and they're back out working.
Yep.
In the summer, people in the summer may not stop and eat. And again, people would say that's wrong, that's inhuman, but whatever. It's the nature of our business. If you're working and you're hustling, you might be banging down a protein shake during the course of the workout at lunch because you don't have time to sit down. I always say, people that go to lunch, I can tell you I've probably been to lunch in the last 20 years, maybe 10 times. From a business standpoint. Because when people can I take you to lunch? I'm like, no, absolutely not. That's Don Saldina. We meet for breakfast every year at Perform Better in a hotel in Rhode Island, and we meet at 7 o'clock or 6:30 or something like that, and we eat breakfast. When I meet with Mark Verstegen, we meet early and we eat breakfast. When I meet people, it's I meet like-minded people who are going to be up early and eat breakfast with me. But if you think I'm stopping in the middle of the day,
sure,
down for an hour.
That's for time. Yeah, it's a really great answer, because I think you're right that so many people in this space have a tendency to be so ego driven, and in part because some people start their businesses because they themselves have had a really great and powerful experience with their own fitness journey, and so I think that's the thing they have to keep putting front and center. My story as an athlete, my story as someone who overcame tremendous fat loss, my story as someone who got out of pain, and that's really useful as a start. But at some point, the ego's got to go in the back seat so you can be of service to other people. And so I think that's such a fantastic answer.
Well, and you think about of service, but I remember, and I forget whose book it was, but they basically said that, if you want to make more money, serve more people.
Yeah, that's it.
And that's the reality. I mean, the guy in the book said, one of the reasons he said, a elementary school teacher doesn't make a lot of money because they've got 30 kids in the class. They're going to serve 30 people during the course of the year. If you want more, you need to serve more. And that's just the nature of our business, is that it is a service business, and you need to be out there serving people. If it's about you, it's not a self-service business. It's not, no one cares how, like, if you look at me, I am the least impressive fitness person maybe in the history of fitness, right?
I might have you beat there, but let's keep going.
I always think, like, no one's ever going to ask me for fitness advice if they don't know who I am. They are going to walk by me. And it's funny, we had one day, one of the girls at the gym, I kind of walked by and said something during the course of her set, and she went to whoever was coaching, and she goes, "Some rando old dude in a dirty sweatshirt just told me to do this." And dirty red sweatshirt, and he was like, "Yeah, old, real old, dirty sweatshirt, red sweatshirt." And they were like, "That's Mike," and she was like, "That's Mike Boyle." I mean, I've had kids ask me, I've had to show kids my ID at my own business. Like, go in and get my driver's license and bring it out. And one little kid was like, "I didn't think that people told me Mike Boyle was dead." And another kid, I didn't hear he didn't even exist. And I was like, "No, I'm here." But if you saw me most of the time, if you were a client, you'd be like, "Well, there's like a old guy that kind of picks up stuff off the floor and walks around and throws Kleenex, picks up paper towels, throws them in the trash. I don't know. He's probably like the maintenance guy." Like, that would probably be most people's perception of me at this stage in my life.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, it just goes to show that when you can put your ego aside and still be effective as a leader, as a thinker, as a teacher, as a mentor, without having it be all about you. And it's so that we get the same thing with Mark Fisher sometimes. While he's very much in shape, we still get people who walk in like, "Is Mark Fisher a real person?" Like, is that just a brand name? And it's like, well, we've done our best to make sure that his voice is front and center in many places, but it's not about him. We have a big team. It's not also about them. It's about the people who walk in the door and putting them first. So I think it's a really great thing to end our podcast with. So thank you for this, Mike. I know we're at time, and I need to have you back maybe in a few months, because I have a million more questions for us to get to, and more people who wrote in, so I can ask you those questions in our next round as well. But as we wrap things up, how can people find you online? And many of them are following you already, but where do you post the most these days?
I probably most Twitter. I love Twitter. I am mboyle19 at mboyle1959 on Twitter. I'm pretty active on Instagram, but I like Twitter more because it's less of like a picture video thing. Sure. And I'm at Michael_Boyle1959 on Instagram. And then the strengthcoach.com is, like, I used to say my website. Now Kevin Carr and Brendan Rierick have kind of joined me in that business deal, and they're on, but we're on every day asking questions. It is a paid site, but we have there's a lot of interaction on there, so that, like, if you're looking to play 20 questions, that's the place to play.
Yeah, amazing. I'll put links to all that and more down in the show notes to this. And I just want to end with saying thank you. Like I said, I've only been in this industry for about 10 years, but every time your name comes up, people have good things to say about how smart you are, about how kind you are, about how egoless you are. So the fact that we talk about this podcast, I think, is spot on. So just thank you for your contribution to my team, my business partner, my work, and so keep on doing what you're doing, because it's serving us all very well, my friend.
Well, thank you, and same. You guys keep doing what you're doing. Like I said, I didn't know you prior to this, but I love Mark. I have a huge amount of respect for Mark. He's just he's one of those guys, super smart, that I tell people all the time, like, go listen to Mark, and he'll make you think. you'll learn stuff when you go there. And so I really did. I did ask him. I requested. I do not request podcasts, just so you know, but I did request this one.
Well, I appreciate it. I think it's been well worth it. I've learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners and our viewers have as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Please keep taking care of yourself and your family as we keep going through this COVID insanity, and let's plan to talk again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks. Hey friends, before you go, just one more thing. If you enjoy this podcast, you get value out of it, you enjoy listening, please share this podcast, comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Please share it with friends and family. We don't spend any money on marketing or advertising. And so the only way people find out about this podcast is from you. So please do everything you can to share it with friends and fellow colleagues in the fitness industry. We love making it, and we want to keep doing it for a long, long time. So I appreciate your support. Go have a kick-ass day. Bye.